Most people think the latest AI updates are just about making developers code a little bit faster. But what if that's not the real story? What if AI is quietly changing the fundamental economics of software itself? Anthropic's launch of Claude 505, which is their first publicly available Mythos class model, really hints at a much larger and honestly potentially dangerous story. We aren't just looking at a neat software update today. For decades, software companies scaled by doing one thing, hiring more engineers. But now, a new generation of AI is making companies ask a radically different question. With an AI that operates autonomously, how many engineers do we actually need? That's why 505 isn't just another AI model. It's a complete paradigm shift. Okay, let's dive into this. What exactly happens when an AI stops just suggesting code and starts executing it completely on its own? For the past couple of years, we've all gotten pretty used to AI acting as a helpful assistant. You ask a question, it spits out a snippet of code, but you, the human, remain firmly in the driver's seat. Well, Fobala 5 absolutely shatters that paradigm. It's moving away from being a passive assistant and becoming a highly autonomous doer, an active contributor. We're talking about a shift from models that simply suggest fixes to models that take the wheel and execute them end to end. As we unpack what early testers are seeing, you're going to see exactly what happens when you hand over the keys to your entire development environment. To really wrap our heads around this shift, let's look at how Fable 5 tackles something complex, like an API migration, and compare it to its predecessor, Opus 4.8. Opus would painstakingly open up every single route, edit it, and rewrite the file. It's kind of like a junior developer doing tedious manual data entry. But Fable 5, it takes a massive structural approach. Instead of copying and pasting, it literally writes an inline Python 3 script to automate the whole migration in one fell swoop. It thinks like a senior architect. But here's the catch, and it's a big one for the industry. Every engineer has to start somewhere, usually by fixing those basic bugs and doing routine migrations. If Fable 5 handles all that entry-level work, how do beginners ever get the hands-on experience they need to become senior developers? It absolutely threatens to break the traditional career ladder. And this leap in structural thinking, it extends beautifully into web design. And believe me, companies are definitely paying attention. Using tools like Claude Code, testers have literally just handed Fable 5 a directory and watched it go to work unsupervised. It builds interactive 3D assets with Three.js, generates fully playable in-browser 3D Pac-Man games from a single prompt, and can even rebuild entire UI sites with custom cursors in like 20 minutes. It even redesigned Reddit with a minimalistic aesthetic completely from scratch. From a business perspective, this level of speed is off the charts. Suddenly, one single engineer armed with Fable 5 can produce the output that used to require an entire team of specialized designers and developers. But honestly, its real power and the disruption it brings really shines when things go completely wrong. Let me give you an incredible example. One developer had their macOS video editing software completely freeze up with an unsaved file. Total nightmare, right? Well, where older models like Opus 4.8 would just blindly click around the screen and fail, Fable 5 actually analyzed the underlying system processes. It figured out the main thread was stuck and autonomously fired off system accessibility commands, specifically axclick, to literally force the save dialog to open. It didn't just push buttons. It applied deep diagnostic reasoning. It automated cognitive labor. It's doing the very thinking and analysis that modern knowledge work is built entirely upon. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that Anthropic explicitly designed Fable 5 for your most ambitious, complex work. It is so highly autonomous that it can operate in the background for days without any human intervention whatsoever, tackling massive projects across finance, economics, and law. At first, this kind of extreme autonomy feels like magic. You work faster, build faster, everyone wins. But it creates a very real productivity trap. Think about it. If every single company can suddenly operate 10 times faster without adding a single new employee, being fast stops being a unique advantage. The market adjusts, and that hyperspeed just becomes the new, incredibly demanding baseline requirement just to survive. Which brings us to the inherent danger of this doer mentality. Because Fable 5 just executes, it easily bypasses the human approval layer if you aren't paying close attention. Testers found out pretty quickly that Fable 5 will just automatically commit code changes to Git or even proactively execute live planet-scale Postgres database migrations entirely on its own. No "are you sure" prompt, no waiting for a thumbs up. Developers are literally having to write strict, explicit instructions into their project files, like their cloud.md files, just to tell the AI, hey, do not alter live production databases unsupervised. When businesses optimize purely for AI speed, that crucial safety net of human review can disappear in a flash. And this intense autonomous capability, That's exactly why Anthropic hesitated with a public launch. During the initial testing phases, the company made a staggering admission. They noted that the model was finding thousands of cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and they explicitly said, a model that can find flaws like that can also be used to exploit them. No kidding. This is exactly why Fable 5 and its early preview was kept strictly locked away in a restricted program called Project Glasswing. They had to hand this model over to the cybersecurity experts, the people who protect the world's critical software, putting it to work fixing those vulnerabilities before letting this level of dual-use intelligence out into the open market.
And this brilliantly illustrates how they are trying to contain the system. To finally release Fable 5 to the public, Anthropic had to implement what they call Mythos-class guardrails. These are hard safety protocols baked directly into the system. Now, Anthropic states that about 95% of user sessions run smoothly on the full, brilliant Fable 5 model. But the absolute second your request touches on high-risk areas like cybersecurity, biology, or chemistry, boom, a tripwire is triggered. The system automatically reviews the request and forces a hard downgrade, dropping the AI down to the less capable Opus 4.8 model. It's an absolute necessity to ensure this incredibly powerful tool doesn't get weaponized. Okay, so we have an autonomous model that acts like a senior engineer, but needs strict tripwire safety guardrails. But that brings us to the next massive reality, the economics. What is the true physical and economic cost of operating an AI like this? Thinking this deeply requires an unbelievable amount of computational power. We're talking about frequently pushing the model over a 500,000 token context window. Caching that much data is an absolute massive drain on computing resources. So now, companies aren't just looking at software fees. They are actively comparing the cost of these massive AI token bills directly against the cost of traditional human payrolls. Let's break down some numbers from the research firm Semi-Analysis to really put this resource hunger into perspective. They ran long horizon coding tasks until they completely exhausted the weekly limits. Now, a Claude Max plan gives you about $8,000 in estimated usage per month, whereas a ChatGPT Pro plan offers closer to $14,000. Fable 5 is just incredibly token heavy. It burns through limits twice as fast as Opus. In fact, one developer burned through over $140 worth of API value in a single 5-hour window. That is wild. But here's the critical so what for businesses. $8,000 a month sounds super expensive for a software subscription, but it is vastly cheaper than employing a full team of senior software engineers. And this financial reality is about to hit hard. After June 22nd, Fable 5 transitions to its direct API pricing, $10 per million input tokens and a staggering $50 per million output tokens. At that price point, using Fable 5 for simple day-to-day tasks, that's just not practical. It is a premium engine reserved strictly for complex autonomous execution. And this creates a fascinating and scary new dynamic, a new type of wealth gap. Not just between rich and poor, but between the companies that can afford to own and utilize this high-level AI infrastructure and those who have to rely solely on traditional labor. So the crucial point is, scaling a product that demands this much compute requires capital on a scale we've barely seen before. Backing this massive launch, financial giants Apollo and Blackstone are financing a $35 billion expansion of AI compute specifically for Anthropic. Let that sink in. $35 billion. That is the true cost of moving from an AI that just types out text to an AI that acts as an autonomous agent. They aren't just buying servers. They are effectively funding the physical infrastructure for an entirely new kind of digital workforce, one that is capable of re-engineering complex systems entirely on its own. Let's ground this abstract concept of AI intelligence in the very real physical world. This $35 billion expansion relies heavily on advanced Broadcom hardware, and it targets more than 1 gigawatt of fluid stack capacity by mid-2026. And the long-term goal, 20-plus gigawatts across frontier labs by 2028. To put that into perspective, we are no longer just talking about software living invisibly in the cloud. We are talking about securing massive, physical fractions of the global electrical grid just to power cognitive labor, literally replacing human brainpower with raw, humming computational energy. Which brings us to a final, absolutely critical thought. We've seen that Fable 5 can write scripts to alter architectures, build massive web assets from scratch, and debug deeply complex systems completely autonomously. The Agentic shift isn't coming. It's officially here.
But the biggest danger isn't simply an AI replacing everyone. The more realistic, immediate future is smaller teams, vastly higher expectations, and far fewer entry-level opportunities. For the first time in history, companies may be able to massively increase their output without increasing their headcount. If an AI can rewrite architectures and find critical vulnerabilities autonomously, what will you do with an intelligence that doesn't need your supervision? That changes everything. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.